Hey everybody, it's October 2025 and things are getting just a wee bit tense in the Caribbean. Just last month, a US drone strike took out a narco speedboat in international waters. 11 cartel members gone in a flash. And that's not just some random hit. This is a straight up message. Drugs are pouring north from this narco hotspot in the Caribbean. Venezuela, we're not going to mention any names, but F-35 stealth fighters are slipping through the night right now as we speak. They're based out of Puerto Rico and they're teaming up with MQ-9 Reaper drones, and those drones are armed with the deadly Hellfire weapon. The Hellfire itself, some of them can be modified to not have any explosives, but the ones we've seen targeting the cartels are obviously explosive laden Hellfires. Some of them can just go right through, so in the future we might see non-explosive Hellfires being used in this mission. We've also got the ability for Tomahawk cruise missiles to hit targets that could be drug labs, drug cartel high value targets, and those would launch from naval assets that are currently in the Caribbean as we speak. In today's video, we're really going to talk about how a full strike package would work potentially against the Maduro regime, Venezuela, and we're going to lean hard into the tech that make it all possible. We'll focus on those F-35s, the insane sensor fusion, the stealth, and then the Reaper's endless overwatch. The Reaper's like that peeping Tom that nobody wants around, except if you don't want drugs flowing into your country. But for the cartels, they definitely see it as the peeping Tom that they don't want. And then we've got those Tomahawks. Those are low-key some of the best weapons on the planet, as we saw them used in the Iran strikes where the B-2s took down some of the deeper bunkers. The Tomahawk strikes took out a lot of those surface structures at some of the Iranian nuclear labs. And when it comes to the cartel high-value targets, the cartel compounds, the beefy mansions that they're in, and also the drug labs that are hidden sometimes in thick jungle cover, the Tomahawk's just the weapon of choice for that. We'll talk about two high-stakes scenarios as they might play out. We'll talk about those at the end, and my goal is to give you no fluff, just the sharp end of the spear when it comes to military tech. My name's Ryan. I'm a former F-15E combat fighter pilot, F-16 Thunderbird pilot, and I'll mainly be speaking to you from my perspective of that. And remember, I'm just a pilot on YouTube. But before we get to the gear, we need to understand what we're up against. It's not just some loose John Wayne style cartel. This is a whole system where the military is basically running the drug pipeline. Back in the early 2010s, this place turned into a major corridor for coke heading north from South America, and the Cartel de los Soles, that's the cartel of the suns, they pulled it all together and they kind of orchestrated this whole shipment pipeline. So think officers, intel guys, and insiders making trafficking their main gig. And those uniforms that we see even in Venezuela, the military there is probably responsible for actually clearing the pathway for these drug runners. So it might even be like drug runners now have a military of their own. We saw Maduro's F-16s do that flyby of the naval vessel, basically saying, hey, the cartels now got F-16s. So this is a whole different style of drug war when you bring in a military that could actually be acting as an arm of a cartel. So everything's getting spicy, and today we're diving into all of it. But likely these labs will be part of the target package given to the F-35s, the MQ-9s, and even potentially the Tomahawks, because they're tucked deep into the jungle. They're trying to be camouflaged and hidden by the operators, and now we've got assets in the Caribbean that can actually spot them. But remember, there's been billions of dollars flowing into the cartels, flowing into Venezuela, and who knows, they could be doing camouflage type technology to try to disguise some of these labs. They've also sent members of the cartel to Ukraine to learn drone warfare. So now we've got a cartel who is likely skilled at operating multiple drones. And sources have been coming out saying that the drug trade, it goes all the way to the top in Venezuela. Some of the top level members of the Venezuelan regime are actually tangled up in the drug trade. So today we'll talk about what targets the US is likely building right now, what those packages look like. We'll talk about the hidden refineries. We'll talk about the downtown bunkers, where bunkers are probably integrated into the civilian population, and who makes the actual calls of these strikes taking place. All right, so let's do a 50,000 foot pullback and let's look at the setup. So the Caribbean's only about 1,500 miles from the United States mainland, so it's not like we're stretching stretching incredibly far to project this force. In fact, the positioning right now is already locked in because last month, 10 F-35 Lightning IIs rolled into San Juan as the big swing, and you know what? That is an airport in Puerto Rico, and that turns the whole island into a ready-to-go launch pad for those beasts that are the king predators of the sky. Literally, they're the alpha of the sky. On paper, these F-35s are there for counter-drug patrols, but you know as well as I do, that could be code for pretty much anything, and something that I've hinted at on the channel before is actually using these F-35s to target Learjets that could be rejoining on 777s or other big commercial aircraft, and those Learjets would be loaded down with illicit drugs trying to make their way into the United States. And then as those 777s come in for a landing, let's say it's somewhere near Miami, as soon as they get low enough, avoiding radar coverage, they'll split off and they'll go to a little nondescript airfield, and who knows, maybe even ditch the jet because the load that's in that jet is so valuable that a $3 million, $4 million Learjet is literally small potatoes for a load that big. But it's not just the F-35s that are becoming the bouncer of this party. You've also got the MQ-9 Reapers, and those are based pretty much right there as well. Those MQ-9s are a force to be reckoned with within themselves. They can fly at somewhere around 30 to 40,000 feet. They're loaded to the teeth with those Hellfire missiles. Again, you can have the Hellfire with the warhead on it to explode or not if you want lower collateral damage. Lower CDE is what it's called in the military. There's your first acronym. Remember, I'm here for you. You need acronyms in your life, I'm your guy. The Hellfires can also be loaded out with different types of smart bombs like GBU-39s. Those are small diameter bombs. Those things can go right through a window if needed, just like the Hellfires can. But those MQ-9s carry some more muscle. They're not just the guy who's at the curl bar all day long that looks like an upside down triangle that can only do one thing. No names, don't worry if you're that guy, I'm not gonna expose you. But those things are built for ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And to me, that's the real mission of the MQ-9. Those things can really hide out and sneak in and get their eyes glued on everything that's going on with this drug trade, and they can do it in a way that is essentially hard to hide from. It's not impossible, but the way that the MQ-9 uses its sensors, the way that the sensor fusion works, it can tie in with naval assets, it can tie in with the F-35, and then even over at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, there's more assets as well. So there's F-16s there, those are multi-role fighters, and then A-10s could be brought in as well. Those things haven't fully retired yet, and those are those tank-busting ground attackers that look like the pickup truck of fighter jets. They're built for a specific purpose, and they get it done. You need a Phillips head screwdriver, you need a close air support attack aircraft, the A-10 is what you would go to. So could the A-10s be rolling into Puerto Rico as well? I would say it's not off the table. I mean, that would essentially be the perfect job for the A-10, rolling in and destroying these narco labs in the middle of the jungle using high explosive incendiary rounds. Those are combat coded rounds on the 30 millimeter A-10 that basically have a little warhead inside them that explode upon contact. So you're essentially getting way more bang for your buck than just your typical bullet round. And the A-10 does it in a way that no other jet can. So am I a little biased because I think the A-10 is probably one of the best jets ever built? Yeah, of course, but it definitely could be something that's brought in. Also the AT-6, that is an attack T-6. It's a single engine turboprop aircraft, and that is uniquely suited to fly low, to fly slow, to use its gun pods, to drop small diameter bombs, even dropping JDAMs, and that would be a nice setup for the war against the cartels. So knowing that you have the A-10 available, the AT-6 available, to then potentially team up with the MQ-9 and the F-35, you've really just started piling things on that nothing is going to be able to compete with, and we're at a point where every military asset may be used, and that is a direct quote that's coming out of President Trump's administration. And then we'll talk about the Navy side. So the Arleigh Burke class destroyer, that is an Aegis-equipped warship, and when you think Aegis, think about a brain, an AI-laden brain that can put a net over top of the entire battle space and be an orchestrator to project force in all different directions and protect the ship itself and protect any other assets that are in the region, like the USS Carney that's cruising off of Trinidad. Their VLS cells, their vertical launch system, I think we're at acronym number 2, but those are extremely capable weapon systems. They can have SM-2 missiles, they could be stuffed with Tomahawks, and a carrier strike group could even sail in from Norfolk, and it would only take a couple of days to get there, and that would bring F/A-18 Super Hornets, carrier-based F-35s. The F-18 Super Hornet is a multi-role strike fighter, and then you've got the F-18 Growler, the EA-18G Growler, for those of you out there keeping track, keeping me honest honest. I appreciate that. But the FA-18, that thing is a multi-role strike fighter that essentially can't be reckoned with. I've flown in the back seat of one of those things, and it was one of the coolest jets to be in just because of the ease of use, the way that that thing can fly at slower airspeeds. Venezuelan F-16s going up against an F-18 Super Hornet, I would just say that it's going to be like clubbing baby seals for that FA-18 just because of its long range ability with the AMRAAM, the AIM-120, and then the AIM-9X. The FA-18 is ideally loaded out with the AIM-9X, and it can target multiple aircraft with its AIM-120, its AIM-9X, and then with its gun. And then you add on the fact that now likely the Navy has gotten on board with the anti-drone technology, and those are laser-guided rockets. So if you have a two-seat FA-18 Super Hornet, you can really do some damage to drones. Think about an F-18 Super Hornet carrying 40 anti-drone rockets, and now you could have the weapon systems operator in the back lasing in, or sorry, Rio for all the Navy folks out there. Don't worry, I remembered you guys, but the Rio in the back could be using the targeting pod to look in, dial in, and target every individual drone and take down 40 plus drones. And then you throw in a 4-ship of F-18 Super Hornets going up against drones, and each of them have 40 drone killing laser guided rockets. You do the math, that's going to be a bad day for that drone swarm. And so not just the Aegis, but think of tying it all together with the best intelligence gathering platform, in my opinion, in the world, and that is the RQ-4 Global Hawk. The RQ-4 Global Hawk spans the different military services, but the Navy has some of these that are uniquely suited to do ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance in any theater around the entire globe. And that RQ-4 can feed live video from way far away, and then you team that up with P-8 Poseidon. Those are maritime patrol aircraft. They're basically built to hunt submarines, and when you think of narco submarines, there's recently been another takedown of a semi-submersible, so that intel coming from the RQ-4, coming from the P-8 Poseidon, those are going to be VIPs when it comes to picking up those semi-submersibles, so even submarines that are all the way submerged, and then go fast boats. I look at the P-8 especially as being able to pick off any of those fast boats that are trying to slip through. And then you've got the F-35. So if you're pumping all that intelligence, you're pumping all that information to an F-35 squadron, I mean, this is almost unfair. We really should probably tie one arm behind our back just to make this a sporting match, but the F-35 sits at the center of this entire kill chain, and it fuses it all into one seamless machine. But what makes the F-35 tick? So the stealth in the F-35 is next level, and then you have radar absorbent coatings, and then S intake. So the ducts go like this. They're basically like a serpentine type path, and that keeps any radar waves from bouncing in there and highlighting that jet. The F-35 cruises at Mach 1.6. That's just a cool 1,200 miles per hour, and it's got a combat radius of around 1,000 miles. And then when it comes to spotting those narco jets, the AN/APG-81, it's an AESO radar, and it's actively electronically scanned. So instead of a radar that has to scan all the way around the sky and then come back around, it essentially gives you total SA all at once. So whether you're using that radar to jam any enemy signals or lock onto targets, you can look through electronic clutter and find exactly what you want. And then you layer on the DAS, one of my favorite acronyms because it's so capable. It's a distributed aperture system, and that is composed of 6 infrared cameras that give you a full 360-degree bubble view, and it all beams straight into your HMDS, your helmet-mounted display system, so you can see the entire battle space all around you. You can see diamonds or triangles over hostiles. You can see green circles over friendlies. You don't even have to move your head. The jet just cues you and tells you where the threats are. You see a convoy weaving through the trees. The EOTS, the Electrical Optical Targeting System, acronym number 5, I believe, that slaps a laser automatically onto that convoy, and now you're prepped to do a shooter eye type situation. Shooter eye means you have someone who's the eye who's getting that laser onto the target, and then you have another jet that's actually releasing the weapon and focusing on getting that weapon to the exact airspeed you need to get it to, while the eye is the one who's keeping the laser designator right on the target. And this technique works. I've seen it work in combat. So when the stakes are high, this is the situation that you want. You want 2 F-35s up there or an MQ-9 teamed up with the F-35, and all bets are off. And then weapons wise, those F-35s are going to be loaded to the teeth with AMRAAMs, AIM-120s. Those are going to be more of a beyond visual range type scenario, and then AIM-9Xs used for within visual range, and you really have the ability to do some damage. And then not to mention, you've got a 25mm cannon as well that packs a punch. Just like that A-10 having a 30mm cannon, the 25mm cannon isn't too bad. Remember, it's not the bullet size that matters, right? At least that's what I was always told. And not to mention the F-35's engine, the F-135 engine, it cranks out 43,000 pounds of thrust, essentially letting you pull 9 Gs whenever you want, and you might even get sick of pulling Gs because that engine's putting out so much thrust. You could also have these things sneak in, fire off AGM-88 HARMs. Those are high-speed anti-radiation missiles. They could knock out radars, and then they could link up with multi-function advanced data links to show everybody in the battle space what's going on. So as an F-35 pilot, you could be targeting other drones, and that's probably one of the main ways you're going to make your money. Just target these MQ-9s to specific boats that you see or any semi-submersibles, and you've really got a lethal combination. And to me, the F-35 isn't afraid of the wet side. It's not afraid to pair up with something that's in the ocean. And that's the Tomahawk Block 5. That's a land attack missile, and these have been around since the 1991 Gulf War, but the upgrades make them even smarter than ever. So they can go over 1,000 miles of range. They can have loiter mode, so basically they could chase a target or they could sit there and wait, and then you can actually tweak the warheads for the type of explosion you want while it's in flight, which is just next level ability. And those things will launch from an Mk-41 VLS, those tubes on those Burke destroyers or Virginia class nuclear attack subs that could also be called into the region. Then they could hug the ground at 50 to 100 feet using TERCOM, that's terrain counter matching, to follow the landscape, and DSMAC, digital matching area correlator. Again, these acronyms are just making me so excited. For a photo finish, these things can photo finish at the end, basically do your bidding after you've guided them through any types of areas that you want. They could avoid targets, they could switch targets mid-flight, and they're accurate to under 10 meters, which is just insane. So for the Venezuela scenario, these things are pretty much made for this operation. They could crater runways at Maqueda, that's the main smuggler hub, or they could flatten riverside processing plants. They could fire off a salvo of however many you wanted, and they could overload any types of defenses before any of those narco F-16s show up. So let's put this to the test with some hypothetical situations. This first one is called Operation Solar Flare. To me, that's just a cool name, and I hope an operation someday is named that. But this would be zeroing in on cartel nerve centers in Caracas. Say SIGINT picks up a big fish that's bunkered in a compound, and they're lining up a huge shipment into a narco jet through a local airport. At 0200, 2 Ohio class ballistic subs that are rigged for these strikes, they let loose 60 Block 5 Tomahawks. These Tomahawks would slice through any SAM screens, and they would turn any runway they wanted to into scrap metal. And then F-35s from Puerto Rico, call sign Venom 1 through 4, would slide in at 40,000 feet. They'd use their APG-81 radars to sketch out any type of narco jets that are trying to escape the volley of Tomahawks. They could use HARM missiles to drop those S-300 batteries and basically keep any type of SAM from being alive in the area. MQ-4 and MQ-9 drones lock onto these targets, let's say it's 25 of them, and then they start to give that intel to the F-35 squadrons. The F-35 squadrons roll in using small diameter bombs to target these boats, and even potentially strafing, since strafing might be one of the most effective ways to take down narco fast boats and semi-submersibles. You've really got the ability to dial in and target in as you're doing a strafing run. So having high explosive incendiary rounds, a couple of those going through a hull, likely even one of those going through a hull, and now you just stop that narco convoy in its tracks. So there you go. We've covered the raw tech, we've covered those scenarios, and those are the potential operations that could be doing calculated takedowns any day now. So if this ever goes live, the Caribbean essentially changes for good. I mean, you can argue that it kind of already has. What do you think? Do you think that the US is walking a tightrope? Do you think this is a walk in the park? Let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear your thoughts. And hey, the best compliment you can give the channel and give me is just watch this video right here. When you watch this video right here, the channel grows exponentially, and you're already doing that, which I greatly appreciate. So I'll see you on this video right here, and I'll drop a link to my podcast in the description. Thanks for watching, guys. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.